Well, good afternoon, dear colleagues. It is a privilege for me to contribute to the Dubai International Food Safety Conference in its 19th edition and to chair this session. I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Samuel Godefroy. I serve as a professor of food risk analysis and regulatory policies at Laval University in Quebec, Canada. And I have the privilege to serve also as the president of the Global Food Regulatory Science Society, one of the collaborators in the organization of this year's program in Dubai, and bringing you this session that is very much in line, in fact, with this year's theme for the Dubai International Food Safety Conference, about innovation and technological advancements. Our session is entitled Assessing the Risks and the Benefits of Food Innovation. As we all know, food innovation represents, in fact, the future of food production, but also is an important part of the solutions that we have been envisaging to the various challenges we are encountering and that food systems are facing, whether be it climate change, the reduction of environmental footprint, the improvement of nutrition and public health outcomes through food. Of course, when we see innovators develop innovative ingredients, new processing technologies, alternative protein sources, or even digital tools that support food production and supply chains, these innovations will not be useful unless they can have an impact, which means that they can reach the consumer or they can support the production of food that are intended to reach the consumer. And before reaching this goal, we know that elements can act as either disablers or hopefully enablers to do so. Regulations is one of the key elements that is or can constitute either an enabler or a possible disabler, and ensuring that we have science-anchored regulatory frameworks that are potentially reviewed, updated, and modernized to be more innovation-friendly is a cornerstone for the success of any innovation-driven transformation, and particularly transformation of food systems. What we hope to examine during today's session, we will be looking at a few experiences around the world, focusing primarily in Asia, being really a leading area in the world, where we have witnessed food innovation thrive, but we have seen also transformations in the enabling environment. We're going to be looking at how these experiences help to respond to the challenges, but also look at how we can look at some of the problems, not only by addressing the risks, but also by trying to assess the benefits. And we could discuss potentially collaborative platforms that can support the stakeholder community, whether be it food producers, whether be it regulators or academia, and even the consumer community, being able to contribute to a thriving and innovative environment for food systems. So we have a number of speakers, and I'm going to start with a short presentation where I'm going to be attempting to set the stage for the discussion, trying to look at some aspects related to the regulation of food innovation. And I'm going to ask colleagues from the technical team if they can use the slide deck that I shared. Thank you for that. So if we look at the drivers of food innovations, as I mentioned earlier, this is very much demand-driven, but also challenge-driven, an attempt really to address some of the needs. But also the consumer is in fact asking for these innovations, asking for various reasons. It can be, of course, a primary focus on improving one's health, It can be also by concern for the environment. It can be by other values and ethics. So, for example, trying to source food in an ethically produced environment, or, for example, favoring local production. Now, when we consider novelty in food production, we can see potentially novel ingredients, which, by the way, can be considered novel in a non-absolute way. It's a relative way, because it is generally related to a history of safe use in a given population. What may be novel for a population can be considered as a traditional food for another population. We're witnessing innovation in production systems, and one of the probably most prevalent illustration of this right now, at least that is talked about a lot, is the cell-based production of food, and particularly looking at what we call cellular agriculture for food generally sourced from animal origin, but even from plant-based origins. We're also looking at technologies that are aimed to support food safety interventions, looking particularly at the development of non-thermal applications, starting with high-pressure processing, which again actually is no longer innovative right now, but we are seeing multiplication of other discoveries in this area, looking at extending the shelf life of products, helping foods being preserved, and helping also consumers identify the food safety status of a food in a real-time manner. And there's also innovation that is related to portraying the attributes of food to the consumer. So essentially, through investigations, through clinical information, we may discover that some food ingredients, whether traditionally present in food or added to food, or others that can be considered as novel ingredients but added to food formulations, may actually constitute a beneficial health effect, or may lead to a beneficial health effect to consumers. And therefore, these investigations about those benefits can lead to the potential use of claims with an attempt to inform consumers and potentially even to direct them to consuming these foods that will match their condition. Now, of course, some of the challenges that we face with food innovation is to be able to allow their access to market. Innovation means something new, and we tend to be suspicious of things that are new, but also, and rightfully so, we can consider that novelty may introduce some risks. Now, of course, if there are no clear pathways to introduce some products to market, this adds another element, the element of uncertainty. And because innovation requires investment, as you know, investments doesn't like uncertainties. So essentially, to be able to support an innovation-friendly environment or an enabling environment, we need to reduce these uncertainties, hence the need to invest in the foundations of food regulatory systems in such a way that they become enablers to innovations. Enablers to innovation, while at the same time keeping the principles for food regulation, the primary principle being the protection of consumers' health, and of course, other principles related to the economic value of food and agri-food production. Now, looking at the regulatory environments of novel foods, we have witnessed the development around the world of various regulatory regimes which target novel foods with changes in regulation, with modernization in regulation. And when we examine the world in the way novel foods have been regulated, and here I've taken 3 examples that I've had exposure with mostly, the Canadian system, the European system, and the US system, most of the systems tend to be systems where foods need to ask permission to access the market if they feature a novel trait. And of course, the novelty definition has to be made in regulation, and that can vary from one jurisdiction to the other. For example, in Canada, we tend to regulate novel food and novelty on the basis of the outcome. So, for example, if you have a food that is derived, or an ingredient that is derived from traditional breeding techniques, but it leads to a new trait where we do not have history of consumption, that can be still considered as a novel food. So essentially, it's not the technology that drives the novelty trait. At the same time, we consider also that some technological changes in food production may require that pre-market oversight. In the European Union, it tends to be more cautious in the approach, and it tends to consider that every change in food production system may be considered to be a novelty aspect, and therefore would require pre-market oversight. In the United States, we have different ways to regulate novelty. Under the US Department of Agriculture regime, novelty is also regulated and actually examined for its environmental impacts, but also for its human and animal health impact. On the other hand, under the US FDA regime, some novelty is addressed on the basis of the existing food regulatory framework. So to give you the example of transgenic salmon, that is treated as a veterinary application and would be addressed through the safety assessment regime of the veterinary applications. So as you see, the regulatory framework varies from one country to the other, but the primary objective remains the same. We want to provide consumers with the assurance of the safety of the foods and the ingredients, but at the same time, we aim to provide an enabling environment to these technological advancements. Now, at the international level, we have witnessed developments mainly under the auspices of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, where there was a discussion over at least 3 years of what was named as new food sources and production systems. And in fact, what Codex decided to do is to encourage member countries to provide applications where harmonization of decisions to allow access to food innovation would be presented to Codex under existing committees. And Codex would examine the situation further if there is a need to look at a new structure that could examine novelty. Now, moving closer to us and really closer to what we would like to discuss during this session, Asia, as I mentioned, represents a great example to witness and perhaps even to study, and even in certain areas to emulate, as to how innovation has been handled when it comes to food innovation, and particularly the enabling food regulatory environment for that. Essentially, what we have witnessed in Asia is huge investments, particularly in research, in technology developments. We're looking, for example, at the largest investments in cellular agriculture. So we have seen in Asia that where there was an investment for the development of innovation in food and agri-food products, we have seen also an investment in the regulatory framework. And we're going to be seeing that in one of our first presentations. So for example, in Singapore, the Singapore Food Authority has been a key proponent to support safety assessment and the development of methodologies that would enable access to market for cellular agriculture, or at least foods that could be derived from cellular agriculture. Most recently, in the context of the 23rd session of the Codex Committee for Asia, so this is one of the regional committees of Codex, there was a discussion that was brought by China, but also by the International Union of Food Science and Technology, where we wanted to discuss efforts of collaboration, and essentially trying to look at regimes that would allow for convergence of decision-making when it comes to innovation. And what we aim to do, because this is really the beginning of the discussion, is to identify areas where collaboration between regulators could be useful to allow faster access to innovations, whether be it for ingredients, for example, that can be new ingredients in food formulation, but also in the way health claims are being assessed and are being regulated. So we're going to be looking at a few illustrations of this through today's session, and it is my great pleasure to invite our first speaker to the session, Professor William Chen, who he's a professor at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Professor Chen serves as the director for the Singapore Agri-Food Innovation Laboratory and the Future Ready Food Safety Hub, known as FRESH, which is a tripartite research and development platform led by NTU and the Singapore Agency and supported by various agencies in Singapore. Professor Chen, thank you for making the way all the way to Singapore and being with us and sharing with us your experience in managing innovation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a huge honor for me to be here. I thank the organizing committee, in particular Professor Samuel Godefroy, for inviting us to present our effort in Singapore. So when we talk about Singapore, I think everyone will know that we are the first country to have approved the sale and production of cellular agriculture products. And so let me give you a little bit of context of why Singapore is pushing so hard for this alternative or novel food. Basically, sorry, I was looking at my photo. Okay. So what you see on this slide is actually the current challenges facing Singapore food security. There are mainly three. First, on the left-hand side, you see a shrinking farmland. Singapore, for those who have been to Singapore, is a small city-state country. We have about 700 kilometers square on the surface area, and 1% of it is allocated for farming. This is a result of rapid industrialization and urbanization since our independence in 1965. And in peacetime, we do import 90% of our food from 180 countries. There has been no problem, so far so good, but in recent years, things are changing in the external environment that include extreme weather conditions, which affect the yield of the crops and other type of food products. Second one is infectious disease outbreaks, which paralyzed the entire global food supply chain. And the third one is a geopolitical tension that pop up here and there in recent years. All these make our food supply chain very vulnerable. So Singapore government has been pushing for innovations and different measures to enhance our national food security. One of which is actually to look for alternative way of producing food in the area of alternative and novel food. And so that is what we call urban solution for food production. This is summarized basically the challenges we are facing, why we are pushing for this different way of producing food. The second challenge is actually the food waste. In Singapore, on average, we waste about 2 bowls of food per person per day. That is a lot for a country, for a small country which imports most of our food. The third one is obviously the aging population, nutrition requirement, and consumer acceptance of all these various ways of producing food need to be assessed before we present the new food product to consumers. Otherwise, we are just generating food waste. So with this in mind, we have put in effort to first reduce food waste by two approaches. One is to reduce a generation of food waste. The second one is retrieve nutrient from the food waste. So by combining these, we hope to achieve overall food waste reduction. So what I'm going to present, so that is a little bit of the context of where we're coming from. I'm going to present to you some of our effort in this first, reducing food waste. Second, assessing the food safety risk assessment of this novel food. Okay, so one of the initiatives the Singapore government has pushed out is to establish multi-agency involvement in this platform, national platform called Future Ready Food Safety Hub, in short, FRESH. What does FRESH do? There are a few key areas. First is industry engagement. There are many startups in the past few years which have this innovative food product. And to enter the market, we need to assess this safety of this novel food product, as Professor Samuel just pointed out. And so this is industry engagement. Second one, we are also working with on the risk communication with the consumers, so that there's a proper communication transparency in the data that we can share with consumers to make sure that it's not just safe but also nutritious. The third one, more importantly, we are not just a platform that advise companies. We're also moving into developing food safety technology research and development, such that we can keep up with time, and working with international organizations like the WHO and the FAO to make sure that the innovation that we develop is not just limited to Singapore, which is a small country, and beyond that, there may not be impact. We're just focusing on Singapore's context. Yeah. So this is about FRESH. So when I talk about food safety innovations, we focus on two areas. First one is helping local food industry to reduce the generation of food waste. The second one is establish new safety framework, new food safety risk assessment framework using new approach methodologies, in short, NAMs. So my focus today will be more on the second one. So let me brief you on the first one, which is how do we work with local food industry. We are doing so by using this data analytics in partnership with Amazon Web Services, and they have established a joint research laboratory with FRESH to use machine learning and artificial intelligence to build model to monitor microbial contamination of food moving along the food supply chain. And we are hoping that to use machine learning to train this model with more data generated from the local industry as well as regional partners, including Malaysia and Indonesia, such that they can accurately monitor and predict the safety of the food produced moving along the food supply chain. We are hoping that with this effort, we will see better data communication about the freshness and also the contamination of this food produce. In a way, along the way, reduce the generation of food waste. So this is the first one, our focus. And this discussion is going beyond AWS. We are also in advanced discussion with Google to set up an even bigger network to use data science, not just for this food safety monitoring, but also using this data integration for the NAMs that I'm going to share with you now. So when people talk about food safety risk assessment on novel food, sometimes it's a little bit oversimplified, like when we talk about these possible contaminants, people just say list down this potential contaminant and pollution, and then they will say, oh, okay, we have done risk assessment. But if we talk to WHO's colleague, they will tell you that this is a scratching on the surface. It's just, we call it hazard identification. So risk assessment, as you can see on the left-hand side, is actually an entire flow of many different layers of effort. So now we are talking about, so when people talk about, for example, cellular agriculture product, the risk safety risk assessment of the cellular agriculture product, they mainly talk about possible contamination, microbial contamination, and other maybe growth factor, this type of potential risk. But as we know, hazard are not equivalent to risk, because we need to really do the assessment before we can see whether this hazard can be converted to risk, or rather we can minimize this hazard from being converted to risks. And so now moving on to this risk assessment workflow, so we are actually making a lot of effort in characterizing this list of hazard. And also when we talk about novel food, when we talk about risk assessment, people tend to forget that novel food have not been exposed to consumers. So it's not just about the potential contaminant in the production systems, but also the novel food themselves have not been assessed. So I would probably share with you a little bit of the two layers of risk assessment that we perceive that need to be investigated. First one is a production system. So as we know, urban solutions present a different environment compared to traditional farming. So when we talk about cellular agriculture, there's a culture medium, there are different potential toxicity that emerge from this cultivated meat production. And so this different environment of a production system need to be assessed. And so this is what we call the risk assessment on production system. Important point is also when we talk about food waste reduction. I mentioned to you about how we reduce the generation of food waste. The second aspect is that when we try to create this circular economy through new ingredient or nutrient recovery from the food processing industry side stream, like soybean residues, people tend to integrate this nutrient recovery into this urban solution, new production system. But by doing so, one may forget that when we close a loop, create this circular economy, everything stays inside, including the potential contaminant. One example is okra, as we know. So this is how we call the traditional way of producing food is no longer perfect, no longer efficient. So a lot of effort around the world now are moving towards closing the loop, creating the circular economy model. And I will not go into detail about these next few slides. They are actually published in the Nature Partner Journal Science of Food last year. So I will show you the reference later. This is some effort. So I'm in a privileged position because we run this fresh, but also develop innovation. So we're in a position to have a balanced view on the pros and cons of both approaches. So in this way, on this slide, what you see on the bottom left and then top right corner is our own effort in integrating the nutrient recovery from the processing side stream into the circular economy. The two cases are illustrated here. One is okra, or in other words, soybean residues. The other one is barley spent grain used in making of beer or other local beverage in Singapore. So what we do see that although it can be integrated in the urban solution in producing, in producing alternative food at the fraction of the cost. The benefit of this integration is that it cut the cost production. But the disadvantages that people do not see is actually the potential contaminants and pollutant which associated with this side stream. As we know, the husk or the husk or the shell of these grains usually are enriched in the in the traditional farming contaminant and pollutant like pesticide and then mycotoxin or this. And this table lists down different sources of processing side streams and various potential risk source, risk point. Like we're not going into detail, but just to show you the table, which is also discussed in our paper in the Science of Food. This is a model that we have proposed to actually using this dynamic approach to assess the hazard while continuing our effort to recover nutrient from these side streams, such that we would actually bear in mind that what is actually coming along with this nutrient recovered from the side stream, and also find a way to reduce the hazard. Okay, so I think this is something that many people are getting familiar with, new approach methodologies. New approach methodology has been well established for no food sector, including cosmetics, environment pollutant, as well as biopharma. So another overly simplistic approach for people who wanted to move these norms into the food sector is that, oh, let's just do it, move the entire norms into for the food safety risk assessment. But we know that although norms help us save costs, save time, and then provide a very efficient first line of gauges on the potential risk, it is not the holy grail for the problem for the entire food safety risk assessment. But we can improve these norms by incorporating the following consideration. This is a slide to summarize what has been done for norms. You can see that it includes environmental health, pharma, and cosmetics. When we talk about food safety related to norms approach, one, we need to bear in mind that when we talk about the other three sectors, we usually deal with single molecules. Well, so when we talk about food, we talk about mixture, and also more importantly, the digestion. Because digestion will change everything through the different hydrolysis reactions. Polymer form gets broken down into shorter form, and that on itself would change the profile of all these predicted potential toxicity or allergenicity. So with this in mind, we have been working with WHO, and we thank in particular Dr. Moy sitting in the audience for driving this collaborative effort. So we have this fresh WHO joint action plan focusing on establishing norms for the food safety risk assessment, focusing in particular on the novel food. And as you can see, this is not limited to norms, but also we are talking about assessment of the novel food and the production system I mentioned earlier. And in Singapore, consumers take food safety as a given. So if we also need to sort of educate the consumers about the nutritional benefit of this alternative food or novel food to make this product better accepted by the consumers. So for that, we are also establishing this platform to sort of assess nutritional benefit of this novel food. And the last one is in purple is the artificial intelligence that I mentioned earlier. So we're working with AWS and Google to integrate this data science, not just in reducing food waste generation, but also in integrating this big data generated from this NAMS approach. And we are hoping that in the next 12 months or so, we will be mounting this WHO Collaborative Center. The first one, I understand, is the first WHO Collaborative Center on NAMS in the world. Oh, time is up. Okay. So this is just to show you that two systems I'd like to introduce. One is the organ on a chip that we are building at Fresh to integrate this different part of NAMS that include in silico prediction and in vitro digestion and in vitro this cell culture validation model onto the system. The important thing is that we need to have a readout on the potential toxicity of these different in vitro tests. The second one is our digestion system that we are proud to show this one. So this one, what you see is a different tubes. They are representing different part of the digestion system. So we call it dynamic in vitro digestion system, which allow us to understand the interaction of food mixture in our digestion system. So this would give us a very good idea on the predict this potential food toxicity. And this is in vitro cell culture validation that I will not go into details. As in conclusion, so we think these two important aspects, mixture and digestion system, are extremely important to establish effective and relevant norms for food safety assessment, not just for novel food, but in general, because we'll see more and more different form of processed food as well. The second one is that we also need to develop this organ on a chip and choose the right organ and not just select one, but select the relevant organ to integrate on these fast throughput microfluidic chips. And then the third one is that so far we mainly talk about protein, about novel food, but novel food is not just about protein. There are other aspects of potential source for toxicity, including lipid and so on. So overall, we try to establish working with Singapore local institutions, including Singapore Food Agency and other universities, and regionally for this data gathering, and with international organizations like WHO and FAO for harmonization of our effort. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Professor Chen, for this great overview, for highlighting, some of the key features of the investments in the development of novel ingredients, but also what it takes really in terms of study, investment, research, but also an integrated approach to bring these to market. So we will be exploring further as part of the panel discussion that we will have at the end of this session. I would like to ask colleagues to hold your questions until then. We continue now with another aspect of innovation, which is really featuring the attributes of food through the development of health claims. And as we know, it's also another area that is amongst the most regulated. And in fact, it tends to be well examined by regulators when food go through borders. So there are discrepancies in the ways these aspects, health claims on labels, tend to be regulated. We were hoping to have our next speakers with us either in person or online. Unfortunately, we will not be able to do that, but he was very gracious to provide us with a recording. So please allow me to introduce Professor Isiong T, who is a leading Malaysian nutrition scientist and public health advocate. Professor T served for nearly 30 years at the Institute of Medical Research in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, including serving as the head of the Cardiovascular, Diabetes and Nutrition Research Center until his retirement. He was a founding member and long-term president of the Nutrition Society of Malaysia and has held various regulatory and advisory roles within the government, including supporting activities within the Codex Alimentarius Commission. Professor T will be sharing with us an experience that is being carried out right now in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the ASEAN experience, aiming for harmonization of the assessment of health claims.
Hi, everyone. I would like to thank Professor Godfrey for inviting me to participate in this 4th Global Food Regulatory Science Symposium. I congratulate Professor Samuel for doing this conference, very important conference. I will speak on harmonization assessment of health claims in the ASEAN region, our experience and how we go about in this harmonization process. As a start, so that we're on the same page, I will share a little bit about the definition of health claims under the Codex Alimentarius guidelines. What are these health claims? And a little bit on the scientific substantiation of health claims according to the Codex Alimentarius guideline. For the bulk of my presentation, I will share about the status of health claims in the ASEAN region. What are these types of health claims and how do they approach this health claim assessment, the framework for this assessing of applications from the food industry. We will see that there's a lot of differences in approaches to these health claims. I also talk a little bit about the efforts to promote, coordinated approach towards harmonization of health claims in the region, alignment of processes and framework for assessment of health claims in the region. And finally, I will share some concluding remarks at the end of the presentation. So as I mentioned earlier, just a brief background on the Codex Alimentarius guideline, as we are all using Codex Alimentarius as the benchmark for our health claims regulations in the region. So according to the Codex Alimentarius guideline, there are 3 kinds of health claims. One is the nutrient function claim, number 2 is other function claims, and number 3 is reduction of disease risk claim. So nutrient function claim, as the name suggests, is a description of the function of the nutrient within the human body, its physiological role in the human body. For example, calcium helps in the development of strong bones and teeth. So it describes the function of calcium in the body, or iron, what role does it play in the human body. The second part is the other function claim. It describes the beneficial effect of a food component in the body, how it can modify the physiological effect, physiological function. It will even bring about health benefits to the body. And this is also to note that this function is not for classical nutrients, not for vitamins and minerals, but more related to non-nutritional substances, other food components in the body. Example is plant sterol helps in lowering blood cholesterol. Plant sterol is not a classical nutrient. It's other food component found in, for example, soybean products. Yeah? Now the last step is reduction of disease risk claim. So as the name suggests, it describes the function of a food or food component, how it can reduce the risk to some diseases. And Codex guideline also emphasizes that a disease has got many risk factors, and one cannot oversimplify that certain food component will help a person reduce the risk just by that food component alone. Yeah? So this should not be interpreted as prevention claims for the food. Food cannot prevent diseases. Yeah? It can reduce the risk of diseases. Example is a heartful diet rich in soy protein reduces risk to heart disease. So the disease is heart disease, and the food component is soy protein. Yeah? So the Codex guideline also provides an annex that provides a lot of information on criteria for the substantiation of health claims. And for example, nutrient function claim, it could be from authoritative statements, and because nutrient function claim are more related to classical nutrient, and a lot of it have been substantiated and found in many textbooks, and well-known literature have already spelled out all these functions. And another point that guideline gives is that some functions are related to groups of foods, for example, whole grains or dietary fiber or fruits and vegetables. Yeah? And the guideline also emphasizes that the best substantiation for health claims like other function claim and reduction of diseases claim is from human intervention trials, and there must be consistent association between the food or the constituent that is the claim and the function that is supposed to be claimed, the health other function claim or reduction of diseases claim. The guideline also emphasizes that human observational studies cannot be used as a sole criteria for substantiating health claims like other function claims and reduction of disease risk claims. Observational studies can help or can use as supplementary information to the human clinical trials that are being forwarded for evaluation by the regulatory authority. Similarly, animal studies, in vitro studies may also be used as supplementary information but cannot be used as the main scientific data to substantiate the health claim. Yeah? So the guideline also emphasizes that it's important to look at the totality of scientific evidence, all the literature that is available, including some of the negative findings, the positive findings, and taken together, then what is the evidence for substantiating the claim that a company proposes to the regulatory authority. Yeah? So let us now move on to the status of health claims in the Southeast Asia region. So this table summarizes the three types of health claims: nutrient function claim, other function claims, and reduction of disease risk claim. And the first column are the 6 countries that we look at the status. Yeah? So you can see the numbers there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the others are 5, 6, up to 10. So you can see that nutrient function claim, almost all the countries have nutrient function claim, except for Philippines and Vietnam. Other function claims, again, Philippines and Vietnam. Yeah? But for reduction of disease risk claim, only Singapore and Thailand allow this reduction of disease risk claim. And if we look at nutrient function claim 1 to 4, many statements for nutrient function claims are permitted. Positive lists are available. For other function claims, much lesser number of positive list or permitted claims. For disease risk reduction claims, even less number of claims. Disease risk reduction claims may be viewed as high-level claims and need very much higher level of substantiation. Let me then go through very quickly each of these claims and what is the status in the countries in the region. Yeah. Nutrient function claim, as I mentioned, all the countries permit function claim. They have regulations for these. There's also a positive list. Positive list means that the regulatory authority provides a list, and only those claims listed in that positive list are permitted to be by the government agency, and then they will get a response from the regulatory authority. Yeah? So Philippines and Vietnam do not have a clear regulation, do not have a positive list. So I listed the regulation here also, so those of you who are interested can obtain these regulations and get more details from these regulations. We do not have time to go through all the details in this presentation. Just an example of nutrient function claim in Malaysia, folate and iron, these are classical nutrients. What are their functions? Yeah? For example, folate is essential for growth and division of cells. Iron is a factor, important factor in red blood cell formation. So these are classical nutrients. Yeah? The next group is the other function claim. And again, all the countries have regulation and also positive list except Philippines and Vietnam. All the regulations are here, and number of claims are here. As I mentioned, number of claims in the positive list for other function claims are much lower compared to the nutrient function claims. It may be 20, 30, whereas nutrient function claim could have over 100 claims like in Singapore or in Thailand. Yeah? Example of other function claims. As I mentioned, these are for other food components or non-nutritional substances. Yeah? For example, polydextrose. Polydextrose is a fiber, it's a dietary fiber, and here the claim permitted is polydextrose is bifidogenic. That means the prebiotic function of polydextrose. Soy protein, again, plant sterol is function in lowering blood cholesterol. So these are examples from Malaysia on other food components in other function claims. The third type of function claim is reduction of disease risk claim, and only Singapore and Thailand permit the making of these claims. There are regulations for this. There's a positive list. Yeah? So the other countries do not allow or no very clear regulations on this reduction of disease risk claims. Yeah? Let's look at Singapore as an example. There are only 3 chronic diseases for which reduction of disease risk claims are permitted. For example, in cancer, they are talking about food components or dietary components. A diet rich in fiber containing foods, such as whole grains, fruits and vegetables, may reduce the risk to cancers. So these are very strict guidelines for the use of reduction of disease risk claims, and only a few countries, only Singapore and Thailand permit such reduction of disease risk claims. So I've gone through very quickly the types of claims permitted in the countries in the region, 6 countries in the region, and you can see very varied. The types and the number of claims vary considerably in the countries in the region. Now let's look at the regulatory framework for application for new health claims. All the countries permit industry to apply for new other function claims, nutrient function claim, and also disease risk reduction claim, except Malaysia. Malaysia does not allow applications for reduction of disease risk claim. So there are different approaches adopted by these countries to consider applications. Yeah? And one of the common requirements is that scientific data must be provided, sound scientific data must be provided, and all the countries emphasize on having randomized human clinical trials for this substantiation. But there are differences in requirement, differences in the regulatory application forms. There's no clear guideline by the countries on what kind of scientific data is required from the industry. There is a review panel appointed by the regulatory agencies, but the way they work, the approach to review of the applications are quite different in the different countries. Yeah. So this is a summary of the regulatory framework. Countries on the first column here, and established expert review committee, yes, all the countries except Philippines and Vietnam. And you can see that they do have expert committee, but the approach to the committee, how frequently they meet, what's the composition, quite different in different countries. There's an application form by the 4 countries. However, the requirement in the form are quite different in the countries. Scientific substantiation is required, but how is it to be submitted? It's not very clearly stated in the regulatory framework by these countries. So Philippines and Vietnam do not have a clear regulatory framework on explaining to companies how they can apply for new function claims, health claims. So recognizing that all these differences in the region, and there are various efforts to promote harmonization of regulations, the types of claims, and also on the application process. So there are very clear benefits of this harmonization. If there's harmonized regulation or approaches to the framework, that is beneficial to all stakeholders, beneficial to consumers, the food industry, and also to the regulatory agencies. There should have been regulatory agencies. So it facilitates international trade, and a same package with the same labeling and claims can cross borders in the many ASEAN countries in the region without having the industry to change the label and reanalyze the components in the food. Yeah? So it's a lot of cost saving for industry. It helps industry to contribute to harmonize trade, to facilitate trade amongst the region, and also help consumers better understanding of health claims. So it also creates a level playing field in the market for the consumers, yeah, for the industry, yeah. So consumers can compare products easily and facilitate consumers making informed choices. So obviously, harmonized framework or claim application will facilitate regulatory authorities and shortens the review time. Having the same process across all the countries, learning from each other, the review process time will be much shortened without having to go through the process all over again by each of the countries receiving the applications. Yeah? So I'll just share some efforts by organizations in the region to try to harmonize regulations and regulatory framework in the region, particularly by the International Life Sciences Institute, or AOC, the Southeast Asia region. This AOC has been attempting to harmonize regulations in the region for over 20 years. We have conducted a series of 13 seminars over the years from 2001, and the latest was the 13th seminar in September 2025 this year in Malaysia. And the regulatory agencies, regulatory officials attend these seminars and workshops. They share highlights or updates on what each country is doing, and they discuss how is it possible to share, to harmonize on regulations, on labeling, on nutrient function claim, other function claims, or harmonize on the framework for assessment of applications from the food industry. Yeah? So ILC also published 2 documents to promote harmonization of regulations on health claims in the region. One is guidelines for the scientific substantiation of nutrition and health claims in the region. And the second one is a guideline on setting up regulatory framework for nutrition labeling and claims for health claims in the Southeast Asia region. Yeah? So these documents are available. We can share this with anyone interested in these documents. Yeah? Another effort is by the Federation of Asian Nutrition Societies and the FANS. So this is the president of FANS is now Professor Yang Yexin in China, Chinese Nutrition Society. Under her leadership, we have established a framework, a technical guideline to promote harmonized framework for assessing applications for health claims in the Asian region. Yeah. So we try to look at harmonize the terms and definitions of health claims, try to provide harmonized basic principles and requirements, try to harmonize evidence evaluation process or procedure, and guidelines also talk about emphasizing on functional ingredients in the Asian region, as these ingredients are already used in many culinary practices in the Asian region. Another effort is by the ASEAN regulatory framework. ASEAN is a government agency by the 11 countries now in the ASEAN region, and as a first step, they are harmonizing on nutrition labeling. And that's almost completed, and perhaps in the next step, they will look into harmonization of nutrient function claims and even possibly on assessment of regulatory framework for application for other health claims in the region. Yeah. So in summary, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we can find that there are vast differences in the types of health claims submitted in ASEAN region, and regulations and positive lists for nutrient function claim are in all the 4 countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. And the types and number of claims differ widely. There's divergent approaches to these claims. So as I mentioned, there are divergent types and number of health claims. And for other function claims, these 4 countries also allow, but again, the positive list contains different types of other function claims which relate to other food components or non-nutritional substances. Yeah? These are the nutrient function claim and other function claims. On the other hand, only Singapore and Thailand have regulations for reduction of disease risk claim, a very much reduced number of such health claims are permitted in these 2 countries, and they mostly refer to groups of foods or dietary components like whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and only a certain number of nutrients in these kinds of reduction of disease risk claims. So Philippines and Vietnam do not have a clear regulation of any of the health claims. They say they refer to the Codex guidelines on these 3 kinds of health claims. I understand that Philippines is also in the process of drafting clear regulations of nutrient function claim, other function claims, and reduction of disease risk claims. So in all the 4 countries, they also allow industries to apply for new health claims. And Malaysia does not allow applications for reduction of disease risk claim. They provide a clear process for for industry to apply. However, there are different approaches in the regulatory framework of these 4 countries. The differences in information to be submitted by the industry, the type of scientific data required, sometimes is not very clearly spelled out in the application form. So, but a common requirement is that there must be scientific substantiation and preferably for human clinical trials. But as I mentioned earlier on, the different approaches in the review process, expert panel composition, the work process of this expert panel differs considerably. Yeah? Obviously, there are clear benefits to harmonization of regulations. If it is not possible to regulate exactly the types of claims permitted, it is certainly possible to harmonize on a framework for assessment of applications by the food industry. And this is something that AOC will be looking into in its next phase of the work on harmonization of health claims in the region. Yeah? So recognizing this divergent approach, then the network established in Southeast Asia to attempt to harmonize health claims, especially the International Life Sciences Institute, excuse me, which I've shared with in this seminar just now, and various experiences over the 20 years. Well, it's potentially may be able to recognize the regulation. However, it may not be possible to harmonize exactly the same positive place. Yeah? So having harmonized regulation obviously is beneficial to all the stakeholders, but there are various challenges in harmonizing exact regulations. Yeah? But harmonizing the framework for assessment of application may be a possibility that ILC is trying to do, and it's ongoing. Yeah? But it's very challenging, as I mentioned, and each country have different priorities, different thinking process, and different approaches that they want to do. And future work by the ILC will certainly focus also on traditional food items, traditional ingredients that are used in culinary practices, and how we can try to harmonize approaches in recognizing the functional properties of these traditional items in the Asian cuisine. Yeah? And Mr. Chairman, if I be permitted to share with participants a conference coming up, a big conference coming up in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in 2027, 2 years from now, this Asian Congress of Nutrition, 15th Asian Congress of Nutrition, to be organized by the Nutrition Society of Malaysia, and we hope to see you all in Kuala Lumpur in 2027. Do mark your diary for this important event. Yeah? And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak in this conference. Thank you.
Extremely thankful to Professor T for agreeing to make actually this recording just a few minutes before the start of the session, and actually for this great adaptability to the technical environment. Also, a great overview, I think, of an experience that I think deserves to be studied and potentially even to be thought about in terms of either emulation or adaptation in various parts of the world, including in our part of the world here in the Near East region, and also amongst GCC countries. And we look forward also to collaborating with Professor T and the ILC Southeast Asia team in contributing to the efforts of harmonization of health claims in Asia and Southeast Asia in particular. Now, to wrap this session up with the last presentation before we move to the discussion part, and actually bringing us the various aspects of risk and benefits assessment, we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Moez Sana, who is currently the head of standards of the Standards and Scientific Advice on food and nutrition within the Department of Nutrition and Food Safety at the World Health Organization. Before joining WHO, Moez led the Food Risk Assessment Unit within the French Agency for Food, Environmental and Occupational Health and Safety, ANSES, where he oversaw the various risk assessment activities within the agency. He also served and had active activities in capacity building, expert panels within EFSA, and various international forums. Moez, thank you very much for agreeing to be with us and to contribute with this presentation on risk-benefit assessments for a resilient and sustainable food future.
Thank you for this nice introduction. Thank you for inviting me for this session. And thanks as well to Dubai Municipality for their invitation and hospitality. So my presentation is here. So risk-benefit assessment for more resilient and more sustainable food future. Where we start with risk-benefit assessment. First, I would like to say that it was said yesterday at the beginning of this conference about the food systems. Our food system are now placing unprecedented pressure on both the public health, as well for the planet survival. Making responsible innovation not only welcome, but essential. And when we are starting to have innovation, innovation can be through new technology, new food, as well a new way to assess the risk and to assess the benefits. We hear about the claim, because there is no innovation without claim. There is health claim, it can be sustainability claim, it can be economic claim. So we need to find a framework that when we are evaluating new food or new production system, we go beyond what we regularly do, look only at the safety aspects. We need to go beyond the safety aspect and have more integrated approach to risk and to benefits. Okay, so this is sort of alarming. So there's a lot of evidence. A lot of evidence shows accelerating environmental degradation, rising diet-related disease, and widening global inequities. Diets are increasingly unhealthy, and for different reasons, underconsumption of whole grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables, overconsumption, for example, of red meat, driving climate, and land use pressures. So we have some climate events that making our food supplies more fragile and volatile. And current practices drive biodiversity loss and water scarcity. Despite the fact that we succeed to produce enough calories in general when we are feeding the total population, billions of people cannot afford a healthy diet. And there's another thing is about when you look at externalities of the food system exceed its economic value. This is something very strong, and we never had economic system or economic activity that lead to more externalities than the value. It's something, no, because we need food, huh? We cannot stop this activity. So this is the problem, that we can generate something 10 trillion of US dollar, but we are generating 15 due to all the effects, NCDs, pollution, impact of the environment as well. So rapid systemic transformation is essential to protect health, safeguard the planet, and ensure social justice. So just quickly, you know those figures, the current system. We can look at the major driver of climate change is the food system, land use change and biodiversity loss, fresh water resources, and fertilizer runoff. So those figures are known. So we know that our food system is leading to those pressure on the environment and responsible for the climate change. Part of has high responsibility for the climate change. And in another hand, when you look at healthy diets and evidence here measured by the relative risk, and you see here there is a sort of meta-analysis of different effects. So you see here example of food like processed meat, red meat. They are in red because when you are high consumer, when you compare high consumer with low consumer of those products, you see exceedance of risk of certain diseases. So you see CHD, stroke, colorectal cancer. So you have some example. Some of them you have high risk relative, other less effect, or sometimes is close to one. And you have other foods like dairy and seafood where the relative risk is not the same comparing to meats. Here you have an other example of food when you have the reverse. If you are higher consumer of those foods, you reduce the risk of certain diseases. So you see that if our diet is very rich in animal source foods, it will lead to more NCDs, non-communicable disease, in one hand, and second hand, it will contribute to the climate change as well, and has a pressure on our planet. Here you have this figure is showing this chart. It shows that if you look at the current food system, and if you start by the black bar, when you have business as usual, you can see that the production of, if you calculate it by gas emission, green gas emission, you see that food system is responsible, and alone, if you imagine that all the other domains that they decarbonize, we will not reach the target of Paris Agreement, which is 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius. However, when you look at one of the action, if we act on our food diet, for example, if we move for more plant-rich diets, which is in green, healthy calories, you see that you have significant decrease, but alone we cannot reach the Paris Agreement target, which is 1.5 degrees Celsius. And if you look at the other high yields, high efficiency, that means we have innovation in agriculture, we are more efficient in our agricultural practice, alone is not enough. But if you combine, half West, 50% and West, and diet with less animal source foods, you see that we have high probability to reach Paris Agreement. So this is something that we can discuss. It is only a projection, they are modeled with a certain uncertainty, but it shows that our responsibility on shifting our diet to less animal source foods and better management of the food waste, we can increase the probability to reach the climate change Paris Agreement targets. Okay, so if you look at all those converging pressures, health and well-being, planet boundaries, social justice and equity, economy reality. So this converging pressure makes it essential that WHO clarify the role of animal source foods in healthy, equitable, and climate-compatible diets. So I'm taking this example like ASF, but this approach of risk-benefit assessment can be applied comparing ASF to novel food, novel alternative proteins. So this is, we just take the approach and it can be applied to different type of substitution. So we have this project that started in November 2024. We call it Optimal Intake of Animal Source Foods. It's a 3-year program. We have 2 expert groups. The first one, we call it GDG, Guideline Development Group, and the second one is Risk Benefit Assessment Group, and are supported by external methodological experts to help for modeling, to help for the systematic reviews, and so on. So usually in WHO, when we develop guidelines in nutrition, we have only one group, what we call guideline GDG, Guideline Development Group, when we look only at the nutritional aspects and the impact of a diet or healthy diet on health outcome. And this time we said we need to do it more. We need to look as well as the food safety aspects and environmental aspects. So the objective of this project was to develop guidelines with quantitative recommendation for the intake of animal source foods. That means clearly that WHO is not saying stop eating animal source foods, but we are looking for the optimal intake. And what is considered here? Red meat, processed meat, dairy fish, poultry, and eggs. And this optimal intake is to optimize health in comparison to nutrient equivalent unprocessed plant foods. So for the moment, we are looking only for unprocessed plant foods because all the new plant-based foods, we don't have enough historical data to integrate them in this analysis. So, and we are considering total population, general population, and taking into account different life stages. And the second objective of this work is to create a risk-benefit assessment framework enabling public health authorities to tailor recommended intakes based on local food system, considering food safety and environmental sustainability. So what does it mean that we have two objectives. The first objective is to look at global recommendation about what is the optimal intake. But the optimal intake will not only depend on the nutritional mechanism but it will depend as well of the context. So if you are shifting from more animal source foods to less less animal source food to more plant foods, it depends on the region and the quality of your production, and the food safety aspect will be different from one country to another one. And we know that in some countries, we don't have the same situation. In US, North America, we are eating sometimes 400% more than we need of red meat. The shift would be completely different from some country in Asia where they're not eating enough meat. So that's why we need to have a system, general, global recommendation, and after that, contextualization by country or by regions. So the GDG, we call it the guidance development, so is looking first at the health effects. How we look at the health effects, so I will not take, I don't have time to explain the process, but this is the regular process that we have in WHO. We are following certain guidance. We need to formulate a problem with PICO question. We do systematic review. We appraise all the available evidence together. We do meta-analysis, and after that, we provide those information to the experts that will propose a recommendation. But those recommendations, we have always the contextual factors, because we need to take into account the affordability of the recommendation, equity, and so on. And we need as well to take into account the environmental impact and food safety. This is in general, so we can take them at global level. This is the first global recommendation on animal source food consumption. But in addition to that, we have another support with the risk-benefit assessment, where we are looking at all those elements, not at global level, but at local level. So you see this, the different approach, so, and the granularity and the details that we are using in contextual factor environmental impact will not be the same when we are providing global recommendation or when we are implementing the framework at local level. Oops, time's up. It's okay? Okay. So the risk-benefit assessment, so what it is a unified framework integrating nutrition, food safety, and sustainability. So it is developed to support the WHO guidance on ASF intake across the life course, and it provides a certain transparency, quantitative, and it is scenario-based approach to compare different diet scenarios. So we integrate nutrition, health outcomes, chemical risk, biological risk, and sustainability aspects. So there is a lot of challenge here because when you are looking at nutrition aspect and chemical risks, in the majority of the case, they are chronic exposure, and you are waiting for something that will happen after a certain or decade of exposures. However, for biological risk, when you are exposed to microbiological risk, it's about acute exposure. So there's some challenge on how to combine all those elements together. So, what is why ASF require risk-benefit assessment? Because I will repeat that ASF role in global ties is very important because it delivers high-quality protein and essential micronutrients, critical for vulnerable groups, infants, adolescents, pregnant women, older adults, because they need high-quality protein. But ASF raised multi-dimensional risks
few million to just characterize and then find a solution to mitigate this contamination. So through FRESH, we have developed this phage-based technology. Within 18 months, we have actually a very successful story. Within 18 months, we have completely sequenced all the contaminants found in the culture medium, and then use this cocktail approach to use phage-based technology to remove this or reduce decontamination. So that's within 18 months. You can see that when we come out with a NAMS-related technology, we could do the same. Yeah.
That is quite impressive indeed. So I'm going to move now to Moez, and Moez, I very much appreciated the idea of having the multifaceted approach of the evaluation and not looking at risks and benefits in an independent way, but even for each component, really looking at the multi-parameters or the multi-level of impact. My question to you is, for each of these, I mean, it is quite challenging when it comes to even one parameter or one dimension of study in terms of uncertainties and variabilities. How would you suggest that you deal with uncertainty and variability in such a multidimensional environment? And perhaps maybe a follow-up question is, how would you envisage communicating about that to consumers, such that the advice that may result of the assessments is accessible to those who need to use it?
Yeah. This very comprehensive risk-benefit assessment is a unique experience, because all the risk-benefit assessment that was published was made for single food. It's very simple scenario. But here is challenging because you are looking at the full diet and the impact on the diets. And that's why we have this important project in WHO, and that's why we mobilize a high number of experts for it. So when it comes practically on the variability and uncertainty, the variability it is taken into account because we are looking at real data, individual data of consumption. We are observed dietary patterns, and we will move from one pattern to another one. So we are taking into account variability. There is a lot of work done to put in a single database all the contaminants in foods that we have from different regions. So we are not mixing everything together. That's why this model will never be applied at the global level, because we think that there is a huge variability. You cannot mix contamination level from different countries and end up with one single estimation. And it is step by step. And you see that sometimes we don't have those response model. We were not forcing the system that we estimate the number of cases all the time. So we can proceed only with the probability of exceedance. And why we can do that? Because we are using something innovative in food safety and the risk-benefit assessment is the multi-criteria decision analysis. And one of the approach of multi-criteria decision analysis is not to just, if you have some experience with the MCDA, the main experience that we have scores and weight, and we sum the scores after applying the weight. It will not work like this, because it's each criteria that, let's say, more arsenic or less cardiovascular disease or more gas emission, there will be a criteria that can vote in favor or against one scenario. You see the idea? And if we have uncertainty in one criteria, we can say, put a weight that because there is high uncertainty, this criteria would not vote with the same level comparing to other one. Or we can say, because we have uncertainty, if I compare scenario one, let's say with, I don't know, with 50 grams per day red meat, with scenario with 0 gram of red meat per day. Because of the uncertainty, this criteria will not play a role to vote in favor or against one of the scenarios. So this is the main approach, and it's very transparent and very natural if you mimic that with your own, when you will have to make decision.
Quite intuitive, actually, in terms of decision-making, I guess. It's a logical framework. If we continue on this aspects of methodologies, and I'm going to turn to Greg now, Professor T in his presentation alluded to the guidance provided by the Codex Alimentaris Commission, particularly for the assessment of health claims. And indeed, it is a valuable guidance that allows regulators who are exploring to make assessments and make determinations of acceptability of claims that they could rely upon. However, the guidance, for having had also a chance to go through it, while it gives us, some principles, some general directions, in the applicability on real cases, particularly when we get confronted with the data that is associated with either a correlation or a causality between a health attribute and a food ingredient, presents some challenges. So if it presents some challenges to a country, it presents certainly even more challenges to a series of countries trying to agree on a decision. Can you comment on what can we do in order to address that, address potentially the limited guidance in application, and what type of experience we need to gain in order to use this guidance towards more harmonization of health claims and decisions in that regard?
So I think one thing to understand about the guidance related to supporting causal claims, and understanding, of course, that the causal claims work in both directions. Causal claims that something is harmful, and causal claims that something is beneficial, and possibly both of those claims being applied to the same thing, as we saw in the discussion of sweeteners earlier. In both of those streams of work, there's a lot of attention being paid to, so let's just say it had 4 steps. And the final step is to integrate all the information to make a claim of causality as to its strength. There's a lot of incredible attention paid to steps 1, 2, and 3. Exactly how to do a systematic review, exactly how to assemble evidence, inclusion, exclusion criteria, all sorts of details. And then there's almost nothing in terms of formality associated with that 4th step. And it's kind of like multiplication by 0. It doesn't matter what you have before you multiply by 0. It can be bad or good. So I just want to indicate that I think there's an important issue of methodological research, and the novel foods realm doesn't bring this problem to the table. It's the problem that's always been there. It's just going to get possibly worse because they're so new. There's not a 20-year history of anything. We need to get better at doing that final step of weighing evidence across streams, particularly when we get out of the realm of using animals and so on. I have been working with this on some time and working on it currently with Health Canada, and I've been working on it in the past with Moez when he was with the French government. I think we need to do it better. I'm hoping to have a really good example for next year if we get invited back, because we're just applying it right now to some very hot topics where you actually get a quantified claim of causality, such as a 10% chance that it's a causal connection, or at the other extreme, a 90% chance, or possibly we just don't know if that's the truth. So I think that's where we need to do better as a methodological group of experts.
So in this regard, you're not necessarily advising a change of the guidance. It's more really providing examples of application and using these examples to better codify, or?
No, we need truly new tools.
Okay.
And in the interests of time, I can't explain them here, but the buzzword would be a Bayesian network.
Okay.
Is how you would put the evidence together to enforce Bayes' rule, which is not just Bayes' good idea, it's Bayes' rule. So that's basically the technology at play here. And so just to use a metaphor, there has been description of this process of weight of evidence as the creation of a horse and rabbit stew. Okay? Just because we're talking about animal source foods, horse and rabbit stew, the very detailed requirements for the preparation of the rabbit, and then the final step in the recipe, throw in one horse. And as you might guess, it tastes a lot more like horse than rabbit. So I think that's where we are with respect to causal claims, and unfortunately, I think we could do a lot better.
Thank you. And Moaz, you wanted to add something?
Just to add something that weight of evidence, 4 steps. The 3 first steps, as Greg said, I think there's established, well established, and there is agreement on how to do it. There is no big debates. But the 4th step, only in Iraq, it is well designed like a decision tree. If you have this and this and this, you go to category 1, 2, to A, to B, or 3.
There, it's codified.
It's codified only. And in the rest of the other activity, like in JECFA, or ANSES, or EFSA, is mainly narrative, is done in a very narrative way, the discussion between the expert. And that's why when you have the conclusion, sometimes you don't understand if there is disagreement or not, because that depends how the discussion is done, and the expression of the results can be misleading. What you can say for Iraq at least is clear. You know what is the output. You will be classified in one category depending on the evidence that you have for different line of evidence.
Oh, thank you for that. And I guess maybe a last word that I'm going to give to William. Between academics, I mean, this is an area that requires investments in the development of skill sets and competencies. And my question to you is, how do you see the future direction where we need to invest in the development of these skill sets? You know, what type of additional skill sets we need to look at if we want to produce risk assessors that are better equipped to address innovation in food, obviously?
Well, I guess I think through the experience that we have seen in Singapore, one thing that stands out is that we should not work in silo. So that could even apply to the regulator and risk assessors. For example, now Singapore Food Agency and universities, we have this very porous partnership through which Singapore Food Agency sends their staff for postgraduate degree studies. And along the way, the innovators from the university would know to transfer some of this current trend or future trend of technology development to the risk regulator and the risk assessor. I think only through this mutual understanding we achieve better synergy and better for food safety and food security through partnership.
Thank you. So on these last words, you know, continuing to call for creation of synergies, you know, maintaining and developing or fostering more partnerships. I think we are good to reach the end of this session. I would like to thank once again the Dubai International Food Safety Conference for enabling us to host this session as part of the program. I would like to thank all the speakers and also those who are here, as well as Professor T, who is watching us in Malaysia. Thank you all also for your contribution, and I'm going to wish you a great continuation of the conference. Thank you very much.
Together with life, health and safety will knowledge we share with pride, for a world where health is on our side. Collaboration and science as pillars, G-Force we aim for rigor. G-Force together we